Hi, I'm Jean-Michel Jarre, and I'm happy to share this moment with you and to comment this concert I've done in Beijing. And it's a very special event that I'm going to comment in English. On the other track, the comment in French is fairly different because I preferred not writing anything about with preconceived ideas, but more sharing this moment with you, more or less like if I was at your home and just talking about this event and the way I lived it. This first number is a piece I composed especially for the occasion, and it's a symphonic piece that I rehearsed and played with the Beijing Symphonic Orchestra, and it's probably one of the five best orchestras, symphonic orchestras in the world. It's really indeed one of the most technically and artistically, I would say, most accurate orchestra. You know, what's very important for symphonic orchestra is to play like one instrument. And most of the times you can work with symphonic orchestras that are a sum of individuals, sum of musicians. Like if you were trying to play with a lot of solo artists, and an orchestra has to sound and has to be conducted as like one boat, to be driven like one boat, and it's exactly what it is, and it shows a lot about how China is today. In economy, in sports, in music, in cinema, it's the same thing. There is the same kind of skill, the same kind of obstination, the same kind of professionalism. And the next song is the moment I went on stage with one of the new track of my new album, Aero. It's actually, this song is called Aero, and it's a song that has been conceived in 5.1 surround sound, what is really the main concept around my new album. I really wanted for a long time composing, creating music in 5.1. Actually, if I've done the music I've done when I started electronic music when I was a student, it was really with the idea of sharing the music with the audience, like being immersed in sounds, in music, and having that kind of organic, sensual approach to music. And when I started in the music business and recording albums, I was suddenly confronted to stereo. And for me, stereo has always been a kind of flat screen of sound, like 2D. And it took me lots of time until the technology was ready to play my music, to conceive my music in 3D. And actually, Aero is an album with some of existing tracks that I'm going to play in Beijing in the next few minutes and sharing this with you. Existing tracks since Oxygen that I already at that time conceived in 5.1 in my mind, but the DVD technology, the home cinema technology was obviously not there yet. And today I took the decision to revisit some of my songs, some of my tracks, to share with the audience the original idea I've got when I started music such as Oxygen, Equinox, or Zuluk, or the other albums. And the second challenge has been to decide to do a concert in 5.1 with all the technical difficulties. It was a really world premiere to do an outdoor concert totally in 5.1. And we worked a lot with the peer company, a French peer company, probably one of the best in the world, called Vidosk. And we worked 6 months to try to find the best way to actually play the music. And then we took the final decision of dividing the audience in squares of 30 meters by 30 meters and to install a 5.1 PA systems for 3,000 people. And every 3,000 people you had a specific installation. And the result was quite amazing, actually.
Nimen hao, Xinhuan, Chungguo Renmin, Faguo Renmin, Xing Xing Xiangying. Bonsoir à tous. Nous sommes réunis pour célébrer l'amitié entre la Chine et la France. Et quant à moi, je suis extrêmement heureux de retrouver le public chinois. J'espère que vous allez passer une très bonne soirée.
I really made the effort to make some speech in Chinese. For the Chinese audience, it's very important to be able to show that we are making the effort to talk a difficult language. And I did my best. The next track is actually Oxygen 2, but in a very different version that I specifically designed for the Beijing concert. Starting with a fairly long intro that I wanted to structure and to build as a kind of encounter between Chinese tradition and modern technology. The reason why that I choose that duo between the electronic flute called the iwi that I'm playing with the sound that I did on a synthesizer, on a sampler, what is kind of between a chomp and a very low flute with a lot of bass, contrasting with the eru. The eru is the Chinese violin with 2 strings, one of the oldest instrument in the world. And this artist, this girl called Chen Ling, is also, her presence is very symbolic because she's been linked. She's been involved in the 89 student revolution. She was married to the leader of the Chinese Revolution in 1989 on Tiananmen Square. So it was an old symbolic point to invite her on stage for that piece, and she will be part of the concert as well later on, and she's a great singer as well. And this moment of complicity we are establishing on stage is for me a very symbolic aspect, if not the main aspect of this project. I mean, to marry Chinese tradition, obviously illustrated by the architecture of the Forbidden City, what is probably the most renowned and also the purest style, Chinese style, traditional Chinese style of in architecture, and the modernity of the concert, technologically innovative, and also showing and also illustrating also what China is today. China is actually a mixture of tradition, mixture of what we know about the oldest and richest country in the world, on a historical point of view, and also a country exploding with modernity and dynamism through its economy, through its sports, through its science, its arts, and through music, cinema, literature, painting. I mean, this country is really probably the most interesting country these days for Europeans. I think or for anyone on this planet today. I mean, the most interesting country is certainly China, about its potential, but also as an example of what can be achieved with obstination, determination, and talent. And this track is also the first one using video images on the structure around the stage. This structure, actually, I created this structure and imagined these modules for different reasons. First of all, I really wanted to respect the architecture and the site. The site is very old, very fragile, and it seemed to me not appropriate to build some heavy scaffoldings without risking damaging the surface of the walls. And and then also for establishing a contrast between, as I said, yesterday and today, tradition and modernity. I went with this idea of imagining some modules, very pure geometrical shapes, cylinder, cones, spheres, and using these spheres, these cylinders, these shapes as screens, 3D screens. And the advantage of that is they are inflatable structures, so they are very light. We actually built them in France with my old friend Daniel D'Orléans, who did the whole structure, manufactured the structure in Brittany. And these shapes also can be lit from inside. So you have two ways of playing with them: from outside by projecting images or light above and on the surface, and also to get some light from inside and to transform immediately these structures into gigantic bulbs. This track also is very known in China because I played this track, Oxygen, Equinox mainly, and Magnetic Fields also, during my first concert in 1981. I've been actually the first Western musician to play and to perform in China just after Mao's time, and it was like playing on the moon at that time, because China had been cut off for 25 years from the rest of the world, and to be able to perform with actually electronic instruments and rock within a kind of a rock environment was really a shock on both sides. And the Chinese asked me at the beginning of this project to play some of these tracks that have been really popular and that are popular in China, because the first concert have been broadcast on television and on radio during the following 15 years probably. The next song is the most popular part of Oxygen 4, very known in China as well, and it makes me think about this whole collaboration I've got with the Chinese part. It's actually been this concert have been actually commissioned by the French government for opening the French Cultural Year in China. But beyond all this, I think it has been a wonderful opportunity to mix Chinese and European way of working, and to establish a true, genuine collaboration. It has been very difficult, particularly for because of language problems that I knew from my first tour in China, my first concerts. And I would say that the key man in China is probably the interpreter, the guy doing the translation. Otherwise, as Sofia Coppola could say, we could be lost in translation very easily. And in China, it's worse than anywhere else. This whole project was actually designed and conceived by myself with the idea of involving the Chinese part on a technical point of view, but also on the artistic point of view, to involve lots of Chinese artists, musicians, but also graphic artists, painters, cameramen, intellectuals, writers. I mean, really to also offer the opportunity for Chinese artists to be present in the widest possible way in their own country. I mean, this concert is actually has been broadcasted by CCTV, the main Chinese channel, for 1 billion viewers. So it was a major event, massive event, television-wise, for China. For the first time, Chinese television accepted to broadcast live a cultural event as well, with very small delay, very short delay, probably 3 or 4 minutes. What is nothing in a country such as China for obvious political reasons. And the fact of involving so many Chinese artists was a symbol in itself, and offering them the opportunity to share this evening with their own country from north to south was a unique opportunity for them as well. The concept, the scenic concept, and the way I'm performing these days, and particularly in China, is fairly different from what I was doing a few years ago with a kind of more traditional rock band structures with a drummer and bass player. And I really chose this time to be like in a kind of, a hybrid situation between the DJ set with mixing desk and various DJ's instruments, and also surrounded by keyboards, and with just another main musician called Francis Rambert, working with me for a few years already, and sharing the lead parts and also the drum machines, and actually to give a more faithful visualization and performance to electronic music, instead of trying to go to a kind of pop or rock version of what my music is not actually. And then if I'm not using a drummer in studio, I shouldn't say why I would have necessarily a drummer on stage. So that, in my opinion, works quite well for this project. The next song is called Geometry of Love, and it's a new song that I wrote last year, and I really wanted to include this track in the program because it's a fairly free electro ambient song, giving me the opportunity to welcome on stage a famous rock Chinese sax player. I mean, playing actually the Chinese version of saxophone or clarinet or soprano saxophone called the suona. And his name is Lin Yuan. And this musician, famous and great suona player, is one of the founder of the Chinese rock and roll, Chinese rock scene, with his friend Suizian, but he's also an old friend of mine. I mean, Suizian is probably the Chinese Bob Dylan or Chinese John Lennon. He wrote the anthem for the student revolution in 1989 on Tiananmen. So he's got some problems with the Chinese government. Now he's been accepted again and he's able to perform all over China. And obviously my wish was to work with him on this concert. But because part of that concert was quite formal and cultural exchange between two countries, and it was supposed at one stage that the French president and the Chinese president would be present during the concert, suddenly the fact that he was on stage was more than allowing him to play, but would have seemed like an official and even more official recognition of the president himself, and that was a bit difficult to put the Chinese president in that situation. So we agreed that because at the beginning they refused the presence of the three musicians, Suizian, Ling Yuan playing in this track and playing later on, and also Chen Ling that you saw playing the Eru, and also she's a famous singer, pop singer in China, and she will join me on stage on Tiananmen Square later on in the program. And then we actually dealt and exchanged Suizian against the two other musicians, but Suizian will be present in the next DVD in studio, because I work with him in recording studio in Beijing, and he will be also present on the internet in China. So actually I thought that this whole arrangement with Chinese was fair. You have to realize that it was a huge event for the Chinese to get people such as Lin Yuan, that you playing in this track and in some other tracks, and Chen Ling, because suddenly their presence was on screen through all over China, and in each village people were able to listen to Chinese rock artists that they never appeared on television before. So it was really a big event for the Chinese audience, and obviously for the Chinese artists, because they've been in contact with more Chinese people than they've been in their entire life just during that night. And you can see the other musicians behind him, watching him, and they know what it means. So these classical Chinese art musicians behind are really sharing this moment for different reasons than musical ones. Actually, my next intervention in Chinese is about asking people if they're not cold, if they've eaten properly tonight, what could sound strange on a European point of view, but it's a very traditional way of welcoming people. If you're concerned by what they eat or if they're cold, it means that you take care of themselves. The next song is something on a visual point of view that I really like and very important to me. It was the opportunity to mix a street organ, typical of the French street, French Montmartre, and mixed with the extraordinary paintings of Zhang Xiaogang. Zhang Xiaogang is probably one of the two leaders of the contemporary painting world at the moment, and his whole work is about memory, recollection, and what you forget. And obviously those two ideas are totally linked on with modern China. So what to remember, what to forget is obviously the obsession of China today. Equinox Part 4 is also a very popular song in China. And on the visual side, I got the idea to work with a famous video artist, a French video artist called Ange Leccia. And I asked him to work on French monuments, French buildings such as the Eiffel Tower, Notre Dame, and Moulin Rouge, and all the most famous Parisian monuments and buildings, and to create this contrast between Chinese monument, Chinese architecture, and the French one was obviously appropriate to the occasion. And he did a fantastic work with high definition video, with actually presenting Paris architecture in a very poetic, very surrealistic way. And obviously to get the Moulin Rouge like now, with in the context of the Forbidden City, is a kind of Dali or Magritte, totally surreal vision. And when I look at this stage, I think the proportion was quite appropriate. It was like a kind of spaceship suddenly installed for one night in the Forbidden City, and within the next 12 hours, all this will disappear, like a circus that you install in one square in a village for one night. You perform, you do your gig, and then you leave the following morning and you disappear in a sort of magic way. But to install this magic was quite painful the previous weeks. Dealing with logistic problems, technical problems, political problems. But fortunately, that night it didn't show too much. On this track, on the last part, it's also an opportunity for Ling Yuan to go back on stage and doing another Suona solo. While I'm playing, you have a lot of activities under the stage, above the stage. This project is a work of 100 technicians, French and English technicians coming from Europe, and also probably 200 or even more Chinese technicians. We were 250 people on stage. All the plasma screens that you can see on stage are really part of the scenography. Very important for television to be able to zoom into a plasma screen somewhere and zoom out from the visuals on the modules. And it was also a nice way to deal with micro and macro. The small elements and the bigger elements, and to continuously also create that contrast in terms of time, but also in space and in scale. You can see actually the symphonic orchestra on stage left and the Chinese traditional orchestra on stage right. And, all these plasma screens are really working well, and it's sometime was saving some lighting problem that you can have in a live transmission like that. Because we were in high definition, the light was quite crucial, and I wanted from day one a kind of cinematographic way, and the way a light closer to cinema than television. The audience was very enthusiastic, lots of students in obviously the last back part of the audience, but very active. This next song called Beijing Voyage, Voyage à Pékin in French, is also a new track that has not been published yet or released in any albums. And I started to play this theme in Athens, where during the concert I've done at the Acropolis, but I finalized this symphonic version for this occasion, because these themes sounded to me quite appropriate to mix the symphonic orchestra, the traditional orchestra, and the Eru, and mixing of electronic and symphonic and ethnic instruments. And there is, I think, a nice counterpoint between the symphonic orchestra and some Chinese traditional sound textures with electronic sound, and the past and the future again. On the visual point of view also, there is lots of very fluo lighting, as we can see, in contrast with some French Impressionist paintings that also symbolizing the presence of my country. I redesigned the whole visual aspect, the scenography, really like a kind of huge 16:9 or cinemascope vision, panorama. And this song, this track is a bit like a soundtrack for that movie filmed in one night. And the sound in 5.1 was really quite amazing. The stage, as you can see, is pretty full, pretty busy. On my left, you had the symphonic orchestra, the Beijing Symphonic Orchestra with 90 musicians. And on my right, stage right, you have the Chinese traditional orchestra. Is the Chinese version of a symphonic orchestra of 72 people. It's the same kind of our symphonic orchestra, except the musicians are playing instruments such as the Eru, the Chinese violin, the zhang, the pipa, and the sound is absolutely extraordinary. You will be able to listen to this orchestra on its own later on in the concert. So it was a total of nearly 260 musicians being involved in this whole project, with the choir also of the Beijing ensemble and Beijing orchestra. I mean, singing actually for this song, at the last part of that song, with the presence of a very good tenor. Actually, all the singers in China, all the musicians playing violin or cellos or percussions are at a very, very high standard, and the choir as well is probably one of the best in the world these days. The audience was really surrounded by sound in a very sensual way, and for them it was really a shock for all these reasons. The sight, the presence of these modules, totally futuristic in that very traditional Chinese context, the quality of sound, the fact that they were surrounded by music, the occasion as well, the fact that it was broadcast live on TV. Some visuals that are very familiar to us as Westerners, but strange and new for the Chinese eye. And the director, Chinese director, did a fairly good job, considering that he had very few rehearsals, and for him it was also a real premiere, mixing architecture, stage, music, high-tech, unknown style of lighting and video projections and so on and so forth. These images are really strong and will stay in my mind for the rest of my life, I suppose. The next track is based on the idea of time, is an excerpt from my album Chronology. It's a Chronology Part 6. And it fits particularly well with the idea of 5.1, when you are surrounded by sounds and sounds turning around yourself. It's like if you are in the middle of a giant clock or a giant roundabout. And it fits particularly well to all 5.1 effects. It's also a good way and a good moment to celebrate the traditional bal populaire, the French bal, and also the fun fair, the French circus. And I'm playing accordion in this in this track, what is actually starting to be a very popular instrument in China as well. And obviously it's also has this French flavor that again was part of the concept of that evening. The visual are actually projected on modules with big high-definition video projectors facing each modules. And the fact that the surface of the modules are not flat but round, curved, created also a kind of 3D effects that worked pretty well on live. And the second part of the song is actually the part I'm playing accordion, and I love these moments on stage where I can play that kind of instrument, where I can leave good ways of leaving my zone and then going closer to the audience like a singer and establishing a different contact, almost physical contact with the audience next to the stage. And I love also all these street instruments like the street organ, the accordion, all instruments that can be played outdoor. And having done outdoor concerts all my life, it's also something that I really love by instinct. And this small circus accordion fits the song Cavagnolo, the trademark of the brand of that accordion is a small Italian-French company, very renowned in manufacturing accordion for more than a century, even more, I think. And the way of walking on stage, taking the space and living and invading and walking on the total surface of the stage seems to also fit with that kind of project where everybody is choosing his place. When you are in an outdoor situation, you don't have any fixed theater. I mean, the audience is choosing more or less its place, his or her place, and it's the same thing on stage. Partly when you are in a one-off event situation where you have no second chance for the audience and for yourself, it gives a unique flavor, a unique relationship with the audience. And I must say that if I've done that kind of concert, it's mainly for this reason. For me, the ultimate performance is the unique one, like for the acrobat or for the classical ballet dancer, where you have in one move you risk everything for the worst and the best. And this kind of concert is like filming Apocalypse Now in one night, or just doing the ultimate jump of an acrobat, and followed by an entire crew trained to that kind of exercise, being ready at the right time, at the right place. As you can notice, I am improving my Chinese every 15 minutes. And I can be at least understood, what is in itself a challenge in China.
Je suis heureux de partager cette soirée avec les musiciens, artistes et techniciens chinois que je remercie tout particulièrement ce soir. Merci à vous.
And I was saying in my own dialect that I was happy to share this evening with my fellows, the Chinese artists involved in the project. The next song Zulukology is preceded by a long intro that I play on the theremin, and accompanied with by the extraordinary faces painted by a famous modern painter called Feng Lizhu, the other leader of modern contemporary painting, working on the idea of the shout being obviously another very important Chinese symbol of modern China. To shout for freedom of expression, to shout is or her expression of hope in the future, and hope for just having a better life, I suppose. The theremin is an extraordinary instrument, the first electronic music ever made by a Russian guy in the 20s under Stalin, called Leon Theremin. And it's like a look of a radio with two antennas, one to control the pitch, the other one to control the left hand to control the volume, and the right hand to control the pitch. And it's a very difficult instrument to play. Stravinsky used it 2 or 3 times, and it's very difficult to get the right pitch, and I can only do it by closing my eyes, being blind and just feeling the frequency. And there is a very nice movement about it, like a kind of peaceful movement, and it's exactly what I always try to express with electronic music on stage, where electronic instruments are not particularly spectacular, not very sexy, and how to visualize, to have physical involvement like in rock music with electronic instruments is difficult. This is a very good example that can be possible with an electronic instrument. And the sound is so moving. It's like a soprano voice, but between crying, shouting, and very melancholic. And in contrast with that fantastic vision was a very strong moment of the concert to me, and I hope to the audience, and I hope to yourself. And the song starting now is from a very special album called Zuluk that I did in New York in 1984. And I worked with Laurie Anderson and Marcus Miller and lots of musicians from the New York scene at that time. Actually, this song, the video was supposed to be made by Andy Warhol, and he was already quite ill, and it was difficult to and finally we didn't do it. But we talked a lot about that particular song. I was surrounded on the stage by Chinese musicians, but also by Western musicians, by, as I said before, Francis Rambert, who is musicians sharing this zone with me and playing with me for quite a while, and also Claude Samar, who was the musical coordinator for the project, and he took care of all the coordination with Chinese orchestras, Chinese artists. He's also a very good guitar player, and he's playing from time to time in the concert, and particularly joined me on stage for the second part of the concert on Tiananmen Square. It was really funny to use all these sound effects in 3D and 5.1 and to surprise the Chinese audience by strange sounds surrounding them. We can see all the flags that the Chinese audience were moving above their heads. And what was really impressive from the stage was to see all these constant flashes of cameras clicking and actually providing special effects actually from the audience and actually achieved by the audience. All these sounds are, for instance, in this song, have been made on the first sampler ever, called the Fairlight, and I play these samples through a MIDI keyboard, and all these keyboards actually link to samplers and different synthesizers, so I can switch from one keyboard to another and to get all the sounds I want on any keyboard constantly. So it allows me to choose the keyboard, the right keyboard for the sounds I want to play. The next song, Aerozone, is also part of my new album Aero. It has been specially conceived in 5.1 for 5.1 surroundings and technique, I would say. And it's all about, it's a song that I conceived around the idea of movement. And then I got the idea to illustrate this song, to accompany, on a visual point of view, this song with some 3D images of the French metro for the slow part, and with shots speeded up of the traffic in Marseille or Lyon or Paris at night. So you have this contrast between the kind of calm, almost slow-mo movement of the metro, and partly when it's outdoor, when the metro is outdoor in Paris, above the Seine, above the river, and some hectic, crazy, and speedy cars that you can find in big European cities. So the song is really structured in three parts. That was also a good opportunity in that song to play with lights in a rather rhythmic way as a counterpoint for the of the video images. And to get the French metro in the Forbidden City was in itself quite a journey. So the space in front of me was around 380 meters long by 100 meters wide. The stage itself is about 35 meters wide, and we divided the audience by squares of 30 meters by 30 meters for audio reasons, but also for security reasons on the Chinese point of view. They really wanted to have the right space between each space, each public area. And to avoid this kind of elitist approach that you have so often in China for Chinese concert or event, I really decided to have giant screens in various parts of Beijing. Actually, three main areas in the city. One in the Zidan district, what is the business area. One on Wangfujin, what is the equivalent of the Champs-Élysées or Oxford Street of Beijing. And the last part on Tiananmen Square, where the second stage is, and where I'm going to perform the last part of the concert. All these sounds, like in your living room, was actually, and they were actually specialized live for the audience in the Forbidden City. And they were followed also via appropriate PA systems and giant screens on different parts of the city as well. The next song is called Aerology, and it's another new track on my new album Aero. It has been specially conceived for 5.1, and I wanted to get this kind of rockabilly flavor with, as a lead part, a mixture between analog synthesizer sound, like that, mixed with acoustic instruments such as the tubular bells, and a kind of 60s guitar sound, a little bit like the Ventures or the Shadows, or with slight Pulp Fiction type of mood. So it's a mixture of different textures, different sound. That also fits the 5.1 spatialization. And I redid the arrangement with to try to keep the maximum of space between the beat, rather low, and the lead part in the rather, high frequencies range. Because the notion of space in music in 5.1 is very important, and to get the idea of less is more is probably more crucial in 5.1 than in stereo. It leaves the space for effects, turning all around and having fun with the left, the right, the front, the rear speakers. And I did a few remixes of that song. One with a young French band called Nemo, and I really love their version. And another version has been made by Orbital, who I like very much. all the visual was actually conceived in on the principle of hologram and holographic images, like the visual of the Princess Leia in Star Wars. The next song, called Chronology Part 3, except from the album Chronology, is a mixture, a very baroque theme, a mixture of classical music with the presence of soprano and the symphonic orchestra, with the presence of electric guitar, almost hard rock or heavy metal, by one of the best guitar player in the world, called Patrick Ronda, a French guitar player, and this instrument called the laser harp. And I developed this instrument almost from the beginning of my concerts. It's a kind of fetish instrument and kind of familiar instrument, almost a brand in my concerts. And the principle of this instrument is actually each beam is linked to a note of a synthesizer, and by interrupting the light, the ray of light, the beam of light, you can trigger the note. And like on a piano, if you are hitting the light strongly or softly, you have strong notes or soft notes. The soprano we see there was doing an extraordinary performance. Actually, technically, this song is very high and very difficult to sing. And in the song you go higher and higher, and I got the idea for stage that the soprano could also physically going higher and higher on stage. And she's actually at 40 meters high, and she's doing an extraordinary live performance. And this Chinese soprano is a great artist, and we were all amazed by the fact that in the rehearsals I was quite nervous about the fact that would she accept to sing in those conditions, being at 14 meters from the ground. And the first time she just went into this kind of elevator without her dress, but just like that, just with a safety ramp around her. And she did that like she already did that 100 times without any problems. And it shows a lot about China today. The kind of determination and being able to experiment, not being afraid. That would have been very difficult with Westerner singer. And the result is absolutely staggering and very spectacular, very baroque. This mixture again of spiritual images, images from Notre Dame, and the very hard electric sound of the guitar, the classical flavor developed by the sound of the soprano voice and the symphonic orchestra. And in the middle of all this very strange instruments, what the laser harp is. And I developed this instrument really with the idea that, again, electronic music needs to be visualized, and it's great to see that the audience at 300 meters from the stage was able to follow what I was playing. And these instruments I always transformed from one concert to another because of the fact that a laser beam is visible only if you're your eye is at 45 degrees from the direction of the beam. So if the beam is going straight to the sky, you are at 90 degrees and it's almost invisible. And then I tried to get a frame around me, like a square or a triangle, but that was quite heavy, and with mirrors that could reflect the beams above me, and then the audience would have been able to watch it, what I've done in Docklands concert, or in Spain, or in my tour in Paris. And then in China, I suddenly got the idea of reversing the process by considering the laser harp as a keyboard and actually having mirrors at the height and the level of my waist. And then suddenly I was playing the laser harp as a keyboard and with excellent visibility for the audience. The next song is an excerpt from Four Seasons from Vivaldi, The Winter, and introducing Patrick Ronda as at the lead guitar, doing an extraordinary solo on that song. And I think if Vivaldi was alive today, he would be a heavy metal guitar player, probably. I really consider his music very heavy metal, very hard rock oriented, very metallic. Could be part of the Metallica, the band. And it's a rock version that I really wanted to play in China as a kind of... It's always fun to play that kind of reprise or version. It's also kind of relief for everybody, because for the lighting people, for on stage, for the musicians, except probably for Patrick, it's really a moment where you can just share a moment of pure energy, where electricity is the key, as you can see. That visualization of the Four Seasons was obviously impossible to perform at Vivaldi's time, where you had only candles for lighting the stage. And I must say that the visual was very dynamic on the lighting point of view, and the only visual you had and you have on this song are just the bushes from gardens of Versailles, the Chateau de Versailles, and just almost subliminal images, as you could just see, of the bushes of that gardens in the Four Seasons, in winter, in summertime, in autumn and spring. And this is my DJ moment right in the middle of the song. And there is a real dialogue between the electronic part and the guitar part. I must say the Chinese Symphonic Orchestra was quite impressed by that version of Vivaldi. The next song is called Fishing Junks at Sunset, and I really wrote this piece as a tribute to China and as a tribute to Chinese musicians. It involves obviously the Chinese traditional orchestra, and I've been absolutely flabbergasted by the skill of that orchestra, the precision, the emotion, and the conductor is absolutely brilliant. I sent some demos earlier, I mean, a few months before the concert, and when I arrived with Claude Samar to rehearse with the orchestra, we were absolutely amazed to see that all the subtle variations of tempo was actually followed by them without any metronome, click track, or anything of that kind. They just digest the movement, the variations, and they were able to play live with the synthesizer without any indications of tempo, just by heart, and also with the playing the 72 of themselves like one player. It was absolutely amazing, and it was very moving on stage to see all these old instruments with the young Chinese interpreters in the China of today. I mean, carrying on with their tradition, and it's obviously a universal message through all this that we can feel. Actually, the previous days, before the concert, we had lots of rehearsals with the band and with this orchestra and with the other orchestra, but also for lighting, for all the visuals. But everything has been very, very difficult. For instance, we had very few rehearsals with this orchestra because we were not allowed to make any noise, so we had to rehearse with headphones, and obviously for that kind of music it's very difficult, and these people are not used to play with headphones on top of it. So we had very few rehearsals for that amazing result. And also the technical staff at that moment was quite exhausted because the last few days, as usual, I was changing constantly a few details like the place of the projectors, the lighting design, the place of the structure, and each time it was a nightmare to change anything that was not planned in advance, and you had to fill 3 files each time you wanted to move one projector or one object on stage of 1 yard, 1 meter. Each spotlight on balcony on the terrace of the Forbidden City behind the stage, you had to spend 1 hour and a half just to get there, because the lighting people, technicians, they had to go behind the entire Forbidden City by another road because they were not allowed to go, obviously, with a ladder or even directly by the corridors in front of the stage for mysterious reasons. So each time they wanted to move one projector, it would take them 1 hour and a half, mostly just to get there. We, for instance, had also to. I asked to shorten the trees because otherwise these trees were blocking the view of the spectators and the audience, and that also took a long time. And then they did it, but they did it in Chinese way. Suddenly they just cut the trees or the trunk of the trees in a rather dramatic way. And they didn't harm the trees, but it was even too much. And it shows that if it was so difficult, it was not so much because they were reluctant to help. They were more cautious about themselves and their future, because so many times in China somebody took a decision and he was punished for it, that there is a kind of trauma, national trauma, about who is taking the right decision. And it's the reason why our staff during the concert was so exhausted. I think it has been probably the most difficult concert and project to stage because of all this. To build the sound towers, to actually build the stage, and 10 days before this event, on top of it, you had the national festivities for the 1st of October. What was a special, obviously a special event, the 55th anniversary of the Chinese Revolution was taking place behind the Forbidden City on Tiananmen Square. So it was also making everybody very nervous. It was the holiday period on top of it. And during the rehearsals, we had an average of 1 million Chinese walking by, literally in front of the stage, because the Forbidden City is the most visited place of China. You know, this is using my iwi, my electronic flute, a kind of electronic high-tech answer to the traditional orchestra, with all these very graphic shapes and patterns, contrasting with the traditional Chinese patterns, illustrating the Chinese part and the part played by the Chinese orchestra. It worked quite well on the visual side. And as you can hear, you had almost a religious silence, because the Chinese people were sharing this moment with their instruments, with their music, with this orchestra they know and they admire so much. It was a very moving moment to share this music in a very peaceful, calm way. I think it's really there where you can see that whatever happens in the country, even if you don't agree with the way they handle human rights somewhere, anywhere on the planet, as artists, as intellectuals, as movie makers, painters. I mean, you have to visit those countries to try to establish bridges with the artists and with the audience, because you can share emotions, feelings that are universal and link with the idea of freedom and brotherhood in a very genuine way. And on a personal way, I'm absolutely convinced that you should avoid any kind of boycott, and going where you can help people to make them progressing in their situation. And also we have to be very humble and not arrogant, as Westerners are most of the time with foreign countries and foreign cultures. And China they don't need the Chinese people. They don't need us that much, and they don't really care necessarily about who we are and what we think. And we're not there to give lessons, but more to learn also how a country of 1.5 billion people is working, and their ideas, their systems is so different from us. It's through that kind of cultural exchange that I think you can really change things, and by sharing music on stage with Chinese and Western people is probably one of the best way to promote our values. And we were playing all together the whole finale of that piece. And we had a very good complicity between the conductor and myself, as you can see. We were looking at each other to end the song properly. The next song, Rendezvous 4, is starting with fairly spectacular helicopter sound effects, and it worked really well, the all effects above the Chinese crowd, because they really thought that a real helicopter was actually landing in the middle of the Forbidden City. And even the soldiers and the security people freaked out entirely because they thought that they were attacked or something like that. And this song is in a very, more disco feel version than the original. Is really a stage number that is actually always difficult for me to integrate in a concert, because it has that kind of anthem feel that sometimes for me doesn't fit with what I like to convey these days, but it really does work on an outdoor situation such as that, and also the Chinese audience are very familiar to that song as well. And on a visual point of view, I asked my friend Ange Leccia, this video artist, to play on and to symbolize the blue, white and red colors through football, through soccer, because soccer, football and Zidane and all these French football is very popular in China. And he went with this very interesting idea to use shots of the French team, but in an abstract way, with a kind of huge pixelization of the video image, where almost like one of the first video games of the 70s or the early 70s, with big pixels made of hexagons, and where actually suddenly the players are almost abstract. And it gave a kind of lo-fi look of the video, and also like a kind of football, but approached as a video game. And it worked very well with the kind of mood and festive mood of the song itself. Actually, I like to devise the light and to devise all the visual side. I actually, at the beginning of my work, when I was a student, I even hesitated between painting and music, and for me the visual is very exciting, and I like to be involved in the scenography, and I actually devise and design all my concerts on the visual point of view. It's like writing a score, but for video or images and lights. And I think it's an interesting way of visualizing electronic music. Electronic music being difficult to perform. I think I've been inspired by the technique of opera of the 19th century, when musicians approached or created bridges with stage directors, with painters, carpenters, or people doing costumes to create a kind of visual environment based on their music. It's what I'm trying to achieve with the tools of my generation: video, electronics, lights, so on and so forth. This song is called Souvenir of China, and it's based on the idea of audio snapshots. I wrote this song on my way back from the first concerts I've done in China in '81, and that was kind of audio snapshots of my journey, my first journey to China. And the whole intro is based on a series of audio soundscapes. In 5.1, it's part of my new album Aero. It obviously created an additional depth, very spectacular. And this song is quite emotional in the way that it's really the encounter of these very industrial electronic loops with a very peaceful atmosphere created by the symphonic orchestra. And when I listen with you to the symphonic orchestra, I'm really moved by the fantastic skill of these musicians and the way they've been involved immediately in the project. And it was the first time that I was playing this song, obviously, in China, because I composed it after my first concerts as a tribute to the China of that time. So the musicians playing this song knew this story, so it created a kind of special mood between us. This little girl is part of that specific version for Beijing, and I got the idea to involve her as a link with the China of tomorrow. And she's just saying a few simple words in Chinese about China and France, about peace, about brotherhood. Very simple words that add some specific emotions to the song. And when you look at her, you can see what China is today, a mixture of determination, professionalism, and opening mind and hope for the future, a genuine hope vis-à-vis tomorrow. It shows that it's not only in economy or sports that China is going to be one of the most important countries on the planet, but also on a cultural level with its cinema, its music, its painting, its literature. She was absolutely precise, and she learned everything: how to move, how to stay still, how to pronounce the words exactly at the right time. It was not that easy being live on television in front of 1 billion viewers, apart from this audience. The next song, Rendezvous 2, is quite a spectacular piece that I recomposed especially for stage. And it has that kind of, I would say, Phantom of Paradise type of mood in its epic way, and kind of mad symphonic rock atmosphere. And it's really fun to play, and the mixture of rock flavor and dynamic, and the involvement of the symphonic orchestra, and even if you have no proper drums, the synth chorus, synth solos with the rhythm part played by mainly trombones and percussions, I mean, gives a kind of symphonic, as I said, modern symphonic atmosphere that also fits an outdoor environment. And on the visual side, I really wanted to express French identity through its literature. And then I chose some short, famous French sentences from Victor Hugo or Jean-Paul Sartre or Chateaubriand, and I mean authors that are known for some of them in China. And also it was a pretext to convey obviously some of our values, of our ideas, and obviously with the French motto Liberté, Égalité, Fraternité, what was actually the slogan, the motto of the student revolution in 1989. But being also the French motto for that evening, I mean, projecting those words in the heart of the Forbidden City was an old symbol. And to get those words live on Chinese TV was a real premiere, as you can imagine. And I must say that the symphonic orchestra gave a staggering interpretation of that piece. And it reminded me of the Berlin Symphony Orchestra at Karajan's time. And the energy of that track was very interesting in contrast with the kind of stillness of the Forbidden City. This place has been inhabited by silence for so long that suddenly having all those sounds and this music suddenly exploding in the Forbidden City, full of recollections of the Empire time. Chinese Empire time was really something very, very special to all of us. A Rendezvous 2 is actually built as a more or less classical symphonic, has a classical symphonic structure, and is the first song where I had the idea to play laser harp. And the laser harp is really as like a pure solo part in the symphonic piece, like a concerto for piano and orchestra, a concerto for laser harp and orchestra. And then I got the idea for this new version to get what we call a wah-wah pedal, like used by guitar players on the sound of the laser harp. And I can actually control the wah-wah sound, in quotes, with the movement of my hands on the beam. It worked very well. And the guy setting the whole instruments told me, be careful, because if you hit the mirror bar, all the lights and the beams are going to move, and be careful because it's going to be very visible. And on the rehearsal, I suddenly had really fun to actually use that mistake as an effect, because suddenly it was the whole instrument moving above the crowd. That was really great because it gave a real life to the instrument that actually experimented live. And it's funny with an idea you are developing for quite a while to still discover other ways of using it. And the symphonic orchestra was really, and this conductor was really following very carefully all what was going on stage. Even when they're not playing, they were absolutely, staying on stage and remaining still and very, very concerned by all what was happening on stage. What is unfortunately not necessarily the case in the West. And these big eyes, through the plasma screen, were like invisible faces staring the audience in darkness, and that was quite dramatic for that moment before the finale. The whole last part of that song was on stage. The time of the effects crew that I've got with me to fill the whole sky with small white papers, and we know that white is very symbolic in China for lots of reasons, and it's a symbol of Renaissance and transformation, metamorphosis. Can be death, but also death in the way that you transform something in something else. So it was an whole symbol to end that part with that color and that rain, white rain. And the soprano, again, that we saw at 14 meters high during chronology 3 was involved in this last part as well. And that was really a mad moment where the audience was surrounded by light and sound and all these white papers flying all around. I was looking at the conductor to be sure that we were again finishing in time. So that is the end of part 1. And then I had to do as quickly as possible to bow and say goodnight to that audience, and then leaving that stage with the motorbike, with the sidecar, through the crowd, going through the gate of the Forbidden City and joining the other stage on Tiananmen Square with other musicians, and some of the musicians are not there to bow with us just because they had to be in time when I will be on stage a few minutes later, because all this being live on TV, the gap between the two parts of the concert had to be as short as possible. So you had Patrick Ronda, the two conductors and the sopranos, the tenor and the little girl, I mean all the Chinese musicians not involved in the second part. They were on stage and staying on stage with me. And then I was leaving very quickly backstage to use the motorbike, waiting for me for the second part that I hope we'll chat together in a few moments if you go back to the menu by clicking at the right place.